Hello. It's great to be here in a room with so many people who have pensions. So that's a different thing for me. Uh, Usually, I'm in the queer community where that's not the case. I'm really excited to be here in front of all of y'all because I'm also here to recruit you um, because I need y'all to be allies, and that's one of the really cool things about this group. My community, the trans community, as many of you probably know in this room, comprises less than 1% of the Alberta population. There are, according to our last census, about 12,000 of us, including gender diverse folks, in the entire province. We are a fraction of a percent, and our rights are very much in your hands right now. Um, we won't exist, we won't make it unless we are considered a top priority in this circle, in this group. These are, you all are leaders. You all are people who are giving up your Saturdays on a nice fall day to come down here because this matters to you. And I'm here to kind of make a plea for my community and say, please don't forget us. We're pretty small and we're about to lose. And that's our reality, is that in probably 3 days, this province is going to start with basically establishing the principle that they get to control trans rights and trans bodies. And from there, it's pretty terrifying the other things that they may do with that. About a year ago, at the AGM, the UCP put out some early proposals of what they might want to do with trans rights. And everyone is kind of like, well, I mean, it's a policy proposal. They probably won't go for it. And now here we are a year later, and they are. And if you've been, I'm sure a lot of people in this room have been paying attention to the policy proposals that have come out for the AGM this year. If those are enacted next year, it will be devastating for the ability of people like myself to even come into this room and maybe have to use the washroom later. I won't be able to do that. We know that Daniel Smith is a huge fan of folks in the United States like Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott in Florida and Texas, respectively. So we can kind of look ahead to what those states have done as she draws inspiration quite openly from those places. We know that there is a very strong possibility of the Don't Say Gay bill coming here. It's a proposal right now for the UCP is to ban any mention of queer sexuality as pursuant, is inherently sexual. We know that that's on the table, very much so. Today in Odessa, Texas, they introduced a trans bounty. Yep. They have created the ability within that city that if a private citizen finds a trans person in a washroom, that you can sue them for up to $10,000. It's being called the trans bounty law. Now, this is already an existing model for abortion, and now they're bringing it into trans identities. And I think we have to see the inherent link between those two, that this is not happening in a microcosm, that they are trying to police anyone who might need an abortion and also trans people. And they're linked very, very conclusively. They're linked with sex education. They're linked with freedom of expression. They're linked with all of these things. And we have to recognize that intersectionality is not a neutral term. Intersectionality, I think, in a lot of our circles, is designed as a good thing. We're bringing together connections. We're understanding people in diverse ways. Well, people who are also trying to be repressive are intersectional as well. And they are repressing people on an intersectional basis. And that's why more so than ever, we need to stand together and understand the common bonds that I believe every person in this room, every person in my community is doing the same thing. We are trying to put food on the table. We are trying to put roofs over our head, and we are trying to take care of our loved ones and make the best out of this life that we have. And those are the things that we need to stand together on. So I guess I'm asking you to make sure that anyone who chooses to represent the concerns in this room doesn't forget my community. We are going to probably lose our rights pretty soon. And how many rights we lose between now and the next election, we actually don't control. which is a really dark reality for a lot of trans and non-binary people. I work with a lot of youth. We've already lost some youth because of these policies, because of just the stated implication. There's already been trans youth who've taken their lives because they don't see a future forward. They don't know where they're going to be in this. We know, based on a groundbreaking medical research that happened, it was published in one of the leading scientific journals in the world, Nature. It just came out a couple of months ago, that 72% higher rate of suicide with trans individuals who live under policies like what Danielle Smith is proposing. The science is there that these gender affirming care and interventions are life-saving, and that the reality is repression will kill more kids and adults. There will be fewer trans adults alive. What I wasn't ready for when I came out was that I'm over 40, and that makes me a trans elder. Don't clap at that, you bet. That sucked. First, I was like, all right, Gen Z, you can't rent a car. You can't tell me what to do. And then I looked around and I realized that for a lot of my friends who are older in the queer community, I am. Because a lot of people didn't make it out of the 80s, the 90s. That the AIDS crisis, I see a lot of people wearing masks, and it was so cute for most of us in the queer community when you're all like, this is the first pandemic in 100 years. And we were like, neat. You don't know any gay people. We went through that. I grew up under the auspices of the AIDS crisis and saw what that did to my community. And a lot of my mentors don't have their friends and family. They're all gone. And I realized that it's not just because I hit 40 that they're calling me old. It's because I am one of the older queer people around. And I'm worried that the transphobic policies that we're seeing are going to do that again to our community. So I'm here to recruit you. I'm here to say, please don't forget trans folks in your allyship, in your work, in what we demand, and then remember that this is all interconnected. I'm not really here to vilify conservatives as much as it might be odd, as I'm running a rally next week called Stop the UCP. I actually really wish we could go back to a time where somebody voting conservative wasn't a big deal to me. It wasn't a difference in values. It wasn't a difference in respect. I want to go back to that time. And I say this all the time. I want to make politics boring again. I really do. I don't want politics to be a life or death issue for anybody. You know, let's debate a corporate tax policy. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Let's debate where to build a bridge. Let's debate where to build a hospital. The answer is always. But right now, I think we need to teach our political parties that human rights are not a campaign issue, that these are inalienable, they need to be respected, and that any party that dabbles in this is going to suffer a catastrophic, crushing defeat in any election. I get asked, you know, I hear people who've been out here as long as I have, or maybe not even as long. I was out here in the 90s protesting Klein, fucker. And what? Oh, okay, there's a little aside. One of my favorite things that I ever got to do in my life is there's a bursary, there's like a scholarship, kind of like a program at U of A where outgoing political leaders get like a little bit of time to like write memoirs and stuff. And old Ralph took one of those when he stepped down. And the guy he used to be in the same building that my office was when I was at U of A. And I got 4 stories of an elevator ride with that guy like 6 months after he stepped down. Whew, that felt good. Yeah, so I guess I don't care when people show up. I don't care if you used to vote conservative. I don't care what your track record is. I care if you're with me now. I care if you see the problems now. For myself. And I say this all the time, perfection can't be the standard. We can't demand purity. We can't demand that everybody shares the exact same views. We have to look at the core values that we have of equality, of freedom, of the right to determine your own circumstances. And that's really what we have to focus on, because I've said things that are racist and I've unlearned those things. I've said things that are homophobic and I unlearned those things. I had anti-Indigenous biases growing up. I grew up in the 80s and 90s in this province. How could you not? And I've unlearned those things. And I think that we need to hold space for each other, that we're all getting it. As long as we're all making steps to be better, then we need to be welcomed in. And I don't care what people's track record is. I care what they're doing now. I care that they're not causing harm. I care that they're making amends for maybe things they did in the past, and that they're working towards a future that we all can see ourselves in. So I try not to hold anybody to a perfect standard, because I can't be, and none of us can be. And so that can't be a rule. And I think one of the things that happens often in leftist spaces is that we get into schisms, we get into fights, and we divide ourselves. And we have to look at the fact and say that we haven't turned left. We're standing still. They're going right. They're going further right and further right. And we're not moving. We're staying right where we are. It wasn't a radical left wing idea to think that people should have, a roof over their head and food, and that if you fell on hard times, maybe there was a helping hand from society to give you a leg up. That things like unemployment insurance and just compassion for everyone, and know that we're a couple bad paychecks away from also being on the street and needing help. And so I always want to be in a situation where I can offer that to people, and that's just a compassionate society. For me, I think we need to build a society that is radically empathetic,